Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this special weather briefing. My name is Sid King, and I'll be giving you a rundown on what we can expect in what promises to be an active severe weather day both later today and tomorrow. So to start things out, we are expecting an active period of severe weather later today and through Thursday. First, we're going to be looking at the potential for individual severe thunderstorms that could develop ahead of the main line of the storm this afternoon and into tonight. The primary severe impacts with this are a lot of the storms that develop in the northeast will fortunately be over the wedge that's currently in place, so that would limit the impact of damaging winds and tornadoes in that area. That could produce hail up to about an inch and heavy rain. However, if there are any storms that develop in the unstable air to the south and west of the wedge, that could see some damaging winds and tornadoes possible in the afternoon and evening. And then as we get into the nighttime, a line of strong to severe thunderstorms is going to enter northwest Georgia and move southeast through the area on Thursday. The primary severe impacts tonight into Thursday will be damaging wind gusts over 60 miles per hour, which could cause downed trees and power lines. We'll see tornadoes, and we can't rule out the possibility of a stronger long-track tornado within the line. And then hail up to or even over an inch, primarily in central Georgia tomorrow, where we have more heating and instability. And then finally, heavy rainfall today and tonight could lead to flash flood and river flood concerns in North Georgia. So here's a look at our current conditions. This is a radar loop taken just about 20 minutes ago. And right now things are fairly calm across Georgia. However, some individual cells are starting to develop over central Alabama, just to the west of Birmingham. Right now, there's nothing severe issued on them at this time, but they are developing, and Birmingham's office is watching these for severe potential. This is similar to the type of mode of thunderstorm that we're going to be seeing developing in our area later this afternoon into the evening. So this is something we've got our eyes on right now. We're going to continue to monitor as these cells continue to get closer to the state line. Taking a look at the setup across the southeast, we have this strong low pressure here in the Four Corners region, and this is extending a strong cold front southward down into Louisiana and Arkansas. Out ahead of this, we have warm and moist air moving northward from the Gulf of Mexico up into the southeastern states. This is going to provide us a lot of our instability into the area. So behind this, fortunately, we have a wedge of high pressure here on the far northeastern parts of the area that's keeping temperatures fairly cool across much of North Georgia today. We're only currently in the 50s up there right now, so that's limiting some of the instability of the atmosphere with the warm and moist air in this area. However, eventually this warm and moist air is going to serve to erode the wedge into the overnight hours, and the low pressure and the cold front are going to slide eastward into Mississippi and Alabama later today and then approach Georgia. So what that brings us to is our severe outlook through tonight. We have an enhanced risk of severe weather in West Georgia. This is mostly for late tonight. And then we have a slight risk across much of the rest of the forecast area through today as well. The individual cells over the wedge are expected in the late afternoon and evening, and then the line of storms enters West Georgia late tonight and moves east to southeast. And then on Thursday, as you can see, they've introduced, the SPC in the Day 2 Outlook has introduced a moderate risk for severe weather in east central Georgia, and then an enhanced risk of severe weather roughly along and east of I-85. As the line moves west to east through the day tomorrow, we can expect damaging winds over 60 miles per hour, tornadoes, heavy rain, and isolated hail up to about an inch or even a little more. And in the following slides, we're going to talk about the atmospheric parameters, the instability, the atmospheric energy, and even tornado-specific parameters that will give us a better look at why we're seeing these risks that we're seeing. So first, we'll take a look at atmospheric energy. This is one model's depiction of CAPE, which is energy near the surface. Now, I want to give a caveat to not get caught up in the numbers or the exact placement of the unstable versus stable air mass. And this is what we'd be seeing generally after sunset this evening. And you can really highlight in this area where we have the wedge set up. Areas in the white with no color shading in there have very little surface-based energy to support tornadoes or widespread damaging wind, which is why I said earlier any storms that develop over this region during the late afternoon and evening will mostly produce heavy rain and some hail. However, as we get into the overnight hours, to around midnight or so, some of that warm air spreads to the north, starts to erode the wedge feature over North Georgia. And although a good part of our area is still lacking the low-level energy for a higher-end severe threat, we do have the concern shift to West Georgia as the better energy begins to approach to the south and west ahead of the main line of storms. Then, in the early morning hours, around sunrise, generally between about 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock, much of the area is expected to have sufficient energy to support severe weather. And given these energy values, this will also mean damaging winds and also tornado, given the low-level wind shear in place out ahead of the main cold front. And then finally, in the late morning and afternoon hours, our concern is going to shift to the southern and eastern part of the areas with the potential for widespread storms. And you can see there's a good amount of energy in east central and southeast Georgia because the atmosphere is going to have all that time to warm up and destabilize through the morning hours tomorrow. Now, what does that mean for tornado risk? I mentioned we had instability values and shear increasing in West Georgia overnight. And so this is the significant tornado parameter. This graphic is a combination of the atmospheric energy we just talked about, and then also low-level wind shear, essentially the turning and the speed of the wind with height. And those are ingredients that you need for tornadoes. So any of these shaded colors support a tornado risk, although the higher numbers and the warmer colors generally indicate there's a higher chance to see a strong long-track tornado. So this is about midnight to 3 a.m. You can start to see those values increasing across a lot of West Georgia. Then a little later, during the pre-sunrise hours, your values start to increase significantly, especially across the west central parts of the area and the northern parts of the area. Getting into the morning hours tomorrow, you can see the values stay high as the line continues to move south and east across our region. And then by the afternoon, the values are high once again in southeastern Georgia, where you have the most heating, instability, and then the shear with the cold front as it moves through the area. So putting all that together, what that means for our severe risk, here is an overall severe risk graphic for late this afternoon through 8 a.m. Thursday morning. Like I said before, if storms develop over North Georgia this afternoon and evening ahead of the line, you could see large hail up to about an inch, maybe a little more. And then as the main line of storms enters later tonight, you could see the potential for tornadoes, damaging winds over 60 miles per hour, which could cause trees down, power lines down, and other such damage. Large hail over an inch, and then heavy rain and flooding concerns associated with the heaviest rain within the line. And then our tornado risk in particular there's fairly limited, it's not non-existent, but there's fairly limited atmospheric instability overnight. But high shear ahead of the approaching front with the main line could contribute to an increased tornado risk and elevated risk, so some brief tornadoes could be possible embedded within that line of storms. But then after we pass about 8 a.m. tomorrow, here's a look at our severe risk, generally wind and hail depicted in this graphic. And all modes of severe weather are expected tomorrow. Damaging winds, tornadoes, heavy rain, and flooding with the heaviest precip in the band, and then large hail over 1 inch. The strongest storms, you notice this magenta area down here along the line of Macon, Eatonton, and to the east. Those are going to be what we anticipate to be the strongest tomorrow, because there's all that opportunity for the atmosphere to warm and destabilize before the storms arrive late morning and into the afternoon. And then here's our tornado risk tomorrow. The tornado risk is going to increase after sunrise as daytime heating and instability increase. The highest risk of tornadoes is expected to be in east central Georgia, although none of the other areas in our forecast area can be ruled out. But that's also going to be our highest risk for stronger long track tornadoes. So our best timing for severe thunderstorms is depicted in this graphic. And this shows where and when we believe our most active window of potential severe weather exists from tonight to Thursday. And I do want to clarify that this does not account for the areas of active weather and storms that are expected this afternoon and evening. That would be mostly west of the I-85 corridor. Excuse me, I should clarify that. Rather, any storms that develop this afternoon and evening, or anything that comes up ahead of the line west of the I-85 corridor, or even in the wedge in northeast Georgia. Apologies for that. And but one thing that's worth noting here, as we have it in yellow text, is that there are multiple rounds of storms expected to affect northwest Georgia beginning this evening. So that's why we have this 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. window in the far northwest corner of the forecast area, is because there will be multiple rounds of storms moving through that area out ahead of the line of storms. But then the line itself should be entering in the generally after midnight into the early morning hours tomorrow. And of course, we'd like to encourage everybody to please stay tuned to the situation as it evolves and the line approaches the area. Between about 5 a.m. and 11 a.m., we have this area along the I-85 corridor. That's our most expected window of when the line is going to push south and east through that region. We can't rule out some isolated storms ahead of the main line, but that's generally when the main band is expected to pass through. And then after 10 a.m. and through late afternoon, that's where storms are going to be passing down into the east and central part of the state, and then through the late afternoon before they exit the region. So here's a look at the thunderstorm timing. And of course, don't focus on an exact timing or location of one model solution, but generally late afternoon, early evening, we're looking at the development of some isolated or discrete cells within the warm atmospheric part ahead of the cold front. Convective models indicate the west and north Georgia will be the most likely location. And then there's an elevated risk in that area, especially within the wedge, for hail and heavy rain. And if the storms develop outside of the wedge, like for example down here near Columbus or down in central Georgia, then tornadoes can't be ruled out because there's a little more instability down there for those to work with. Late Wednesday night, late tonight, there's multiple rounds of cells ahead of the main line in Georgia. You can see the line projected back here at the Mississippi-Alabama state line, and there's some cells and storms out ahead of it impacting northwest Georgia. So this is sort of what I was talking about earlier, when we're seeing model guidance indicating multiple rounds of storms coming through that area. There is the potential of strong and long track tornadoes in west central Georgia ahead of the main line as it approaches the area. And also, especially that holds true when this gets closer during the early morning hours between 4 and 5 a.m. This is when the main line of storms is going to be entering into northwest Georgia during the early morning hours, and this line is going to be our primary severe weather threat. Storms within this line could produce damaging winds over 60 miles per hour and tornadoes. Like I said earlier, potential for long track tornadoes and strong tornadoes embedded within that line. And then hail up to an inch and heavy rain is also a threat. Now here's a look at about 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. This is the main line of storms continuing to move east. Once again, storms within that line could have all the threats that I mentioned earlier on the last slide. And then 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., late afternoon, this is where we're thinking the storms are going to continue to push southeast into east central Georgia. With warmer air and more instability, that'll lead to the threat for strengthening storms in the late morning and afternoon. And storms are going to continue to move through that area before they exit during the afternoon. And of course, with the shear of the cold front and the warmer, more unstable air there, that's also going to increase the risk down in east central Georgia of some long track tornadoes, possibly strong tornadoes associated with the line as well. So here's a look once again of the best timing for severe to sum things up. This is once again sort of a broad brush window for the timing of the severe, because there's still a little bit of uncertainty with the timing. Some models are running a little faster than the others, so we'd like to encourage everybody to please stay tuned as the situation evolves. So our threat levels and confidence, once again, we've increased our threat for damaging winds and tornadoes associated with this system, but we were thinking of high threats for damaging winds, rainfall, heavy rainfall and flooding, and tornadoes, and then also an elevated threat for large hail up to or a little more than an inch as well. And speaking of the heavy rainfall, we're expecting about an additional inch of rain or more generally along and north of the I-20 corridor. And then generally about 1.5 to 3 inches in the far northern tier. The WPC has diagnosed a slight risk of flash flooding and river flooding in North Georgia, but as heavy rain moves into the area with the line, please stay tuned for any changes we have in the forecast if we need to issue a watch or anything like that. Rain tomorrow, we're expecting rainfall of about an inch or less south of I-85 tomorrow as the storms move southeastward. There's a minimal flooding risk in Georgia on Thursday, as you can see through the excessive rainfall risk here on the bottom right of the screen. Most of the heavier rain is going to be expected as this stuff moves in today, and then the rainfall should be a bit more sparse tomorrow. And then finally, that brings us to river flooding potential. We have several river forecast points in North Georgia forecast to reach minor flood stage in the days following the heavy rainfall. Here's a link here on the slide for updated river, stream, and forecast information. You can follow that and keep up with the latest for river flooding in your area. So once again, to sum things up, we've got an active period of severe weather expected late today through Thursday. The first round is going to be looking at individual potentially severe thunderstorms developing ahead of the main line this afternoon and tonight. Storms that form in the cooler areas over the wedge could produce hail and heavy rain, but may not have the the instability necessary for damaging winds and tornadoes. However, if storms develop south and west of the wedge, damaging winds and tornadoes could also be possible with those storms. Now, the main line is going to be approaching overnight and moving southeast through the day on Thursday. And there's damaging wind gusts expected with these, over 60 miles per hour, which could cause widespread trees and power lines down where that happens. Tornadoes are possible within the line. We can't rule out a stronger long-track tornado, especially as the line crosses around the state border, and then once again in east central Georgia tomorrow, where you have the chance to heat up in the morning. Hail is possible with the line, especially with more instability in central Georgia. And then finally, heavy rainfall today and tonight could lead to flash flood and river flood concerns in North Georgia. Now, you may be wondering if we're going to have any more updates coming in the next day. We will be having email and quick video updates continuing as time allows. We're expecting to send out an email update this evening, especially as we get more forecast information and the day shift finishes up their afternoon package. We may also do some quick video or social media updates as well. At this time, we're not expecting any more special weather briefings for this severe weather event. But as we transition to severe weather operations, updates are going to be relayed real-time via NWS chat and social media, and then finally on our webpage at weather.gov/Atlanta. And that concludes this special briefing. We'd like to thank you all for your attention and for joining us today. We're going to open it up for questions, but if you don't have any questions, best of luck, and thanks again.